around 4, I was fascinated with my reflection. I would spend ages looking at myself in any shiny or reflective surface and sometimes press my nose or mouth against it. Stupid crap that kids do. One day I was doing so with a big stainless steel pot. I pressed my lips against it to discover that mom was boiling some potatoes. That was not pleasant. Too many things. Putting a magnet on our new TV was one. I did this when I was 4 or 5. It's easily fixable with a stronger magnet or a handheld degasser though. Okay, so when I was 5 or 6, I knew that I shouldn't drink out of a sick person's cup or I'll get sick too. So whenever my mom or dad got sick and they asked me to fetch them a glass of water, I'd secretly lick the whole top of the cup so they'd get better when they drink it because my healthy saliva is supposed to heal any sickness. That's sweet gross. I was seeing how high up in the air I could throw a brick I found on the road. Brick landed on my back and seriously winded me. I just lay on the floor gasping for air and helpless. I imagine being an onlooker just watching a kid throw a brick and get hit by it. Of course I'd be worried, not a monster, but after I found out you were okay I'd still laugh. My friend and I used to pretend we were dogs, kneel on the ground and slurp water out of puddles. I tried eating sticks and grass. One day when I was 6 I was in the garden playing on the swing. My friend and I had got into an argument about whether I was a cat or a human. So I promptly stood up on the swing and jumped off head first, with every faith that I would somehow land gracefully on all fours like a cat. Instead I broke my arm, and that was the day I learned that I am not a cat. The best part is that you didn't even attempt to catch yourself. You just thought your cat instincts would just magically kick in. I was maybe 5 at the time. I thought it was stupid that you had to take off a shirt to iron it. So I grabbed the hot iron that my mom stepped away from for a second, and slowly started bringing it to my chest. Then I dropped it on my foot and cut it open, burned it. That was not a fun day. Could have been worse. You could have tried to iron your pants. I had this weird idea that if I could force myself not to pay attention to my breathing I could trick myself into not having to breathe. I had this weird idea that if I didn't think about breathing, I'd forget about it and die. You could always find me breathing very heavily. We all learn by doing some pretty stupid stuff, like test which is wider, my finger or a staple. By stapling my finger was wider. Yep, aperture science needs you. When I was about 6 my mum left me in the bath alone for about 5 minutes while she went and got a towel. I spotted my mum's razor on the counter. It'd seen my mum shaving her legs and my dad shaving his face, so I just assumed both genders shaved everywhere. I dragged the razor all over my body and face. At the time I didn't feel anything. All I remember is my mum screaming when she came back in the room and I was covered in blood. I thought she was screaming because she couldn't believe how grown up I was, so I just creepily smiled up at her. Jesus. When I was in the 1st grade we had story time at the end of every day. During one particular story time the urge to use the bathroom hit me and I put my hand up. The teacher ignored this. So I got a little frightened as the feeling was creeping on me fast. Many years later I would discover this feeling is called touching cloth, and I wiggled and strained to be noticed. The teacher simply said, "Jack, be quiet. It is story time." I couldn't even squeak out a bit in defiance. So I sat there, in misery. I knew what was coming and there was no stopping it. I sat there, surrounded by my grade 1 peers and crap myself. I remember the hot sensation filling my pants and I remember physically rising off the ground in a weird, jaunty motion as my own fecal matter came between myself and the floor. Literally 2 minutes later the story was finished and we had to go home. My mother was waiting in the schoolyard to take me home and I kinda waddled over to her crying, and when she asked what was wrong I leaned in and quietly told her how I needed to poo but the teacher wouldn't let me go. My mother grabbed my hand and said right then. She stormed off towards my classroom and with her grasping my hand tightly I had no choice but to follow. All the while crap was leaking out of my underwear and down my pant legs. We got to my classroom and my mother let my teacher have it. I had never heard her say words like that ever. It would have been great if I didn't have crap in my shoes. Fun times were had by all. I visited my grandparents in Poland every summer as a kid, and when I was about 6 or 7, my dad couldn't go with me, so I went with a good friend of his. So we get there, to the airport, get through security, and I start looking for my grandparents, and then I saw my grandma. So I ran to her as fast as my little legs could carry me, and hugged her as hard as I could. I was so excited. She was my favorite back then. It was around this time that I heard my grandma and grandpa calling to me from a few feet away. I looked up, still hugging, and saw a very confused and surprised old lady. It was not my grandmother. In my defense, they both had glasses. Was trying to be cool and rolled up dry grass into a piece of printer paper, and tried to smoke it. That didn't turn out well. 7th grade was a fun time. I peed in the grass in my backyard as a child because I thought my dog would understand me through my urine. I kicked my cousin in the knee so hard that I broke 12 bones in my foot. 2 of them were compound fractures. That's one sturdy cousin you have there. My friend ate Tide powder detergent then crawled inside the dryer and had her brother turn it on. Dumb frick didn't even know that you don't put detergent in the dryer. I went crying to mum and dad because I had forgotten how to breathe, which I said, whilst breathing. I told my parents that I'd never been to sleep because I didn't remember being asleep. I was probably about 5. I threw a rock at a car. The car stopped. My mother stepped out and grounded me. That's for getting me mega blocks and not Legos, mom. I climbed inside a white, plastic, stand-up hamper and jammed my fingers into all of the tiny holes. Cue hysterical 4-year-old crying. I'm stuck. I'm stuck. My older sisters, being the angels they are, broke the news that I'd probably be stuck forever. They then proceeded to divvy up all of my toys between them in front of me. 20 minutes later, they cut the hamper around my fingers. When I was 10 I got taped all over my dong because I was tired of having to go pee. Eventually I had to go pee and it was like when you put your finger over a hose and I got pee all over the bathroom. I started crying because I couldn't get the tape off and my mom had to cut it off with scissors, the whole time with me crying because I thought she was going to cut my dong off. I have never lived this down. I attempted, twice, to sharpen the nail on my pinky finger with a pencil sharpener. Was sick as a 4-year-old, but was already a brilliant diagnostician. We were on vacation in California and I came out of the bathroom to announce to my mother, "Mommy, I didn't feel well so I ate all the Tylenol family size bottle." Mom immediately called poison control and started making me puke it up. I think they made an episode of House about it. Jumped down a flight of stairs onto a pillow I'd placed at the bottom. Walked away no problem. But when I reflect on my childhood it's just one of many apparent miracles I experienced. I'm sure there's lots but the first thing that comes to mind is I put a stethoscope in my dog's ears while he was sleeping and screamed into it. I had to get stitches on my neck and the bite marks narrowly missed my eye. Still a barely noticeable scar on my neck but thankfully the dog was alright. Don't leave stupid kids unsupervised. Wore Superman PJs and jumped off the top landing of the stairs because I thought I could fly. You're the reason that Superman costumes, pajamas and the like all have warnings on the packaging that says warning. Garment does not enable the wearer to fly. I threw mud at a girl after telling her to close her eyes once. She started crying and ran away and I felt terrible. My brothers and I stood on top of a hill of dirt, throwing clumps of mud and dirt at the girl from down the street. But she started crying and ran away. I didn't feel bad because she stole my Skipper doll, and straight up lied to my face about it. Called the male teacher mom. I think everyone has been called mom by a small child. Called a truck driver a honky cause I wanted him to honk his horn. I was watching Ben 10 and I kneed myself in the face while dancing to the song. I knocked myself out. I filled my dad's gas tank with water. I was just trying to be helpful. Similar story. I mixed dirt and water in an empty 2-liter bottle to make oil which I dumped into our heating oil tank. By the 5th or 6th bottle, my dad noticed. It was hard for them to really punish the stupidity, since my whole purpose was to save our family some money. I was wondering what I tasted like, so I took quite a big bite off my arm. Apparently I was surprised it hurt. When I was about 7 I was playing in a barn filled with hay bales. I noticed there was some baling twine dangling from the ceiling. I had a genius idea and decided I wanted to bungee jump. So I proceeded to tie the loose end around my waist and then leapt off the highest bale. It worked well, too well, and I quickly realized the mistake I made. I couldn't untie myself, so was left dangling in the air unable to do anything but swing and reflect upon my own dumbassery. After a while, someone found me and cut me down, but I can only imagine what it must have been like finding a child in full pinata mode like that. Tried to make a bridge across a creek by throwing down a piece of plywood so I could ride my bike across. You can guess how that ended. I once stuffed a ball bearing up my nose to prove a point. I can't remember what that point was anymore. In 6th grade, I thought I was friends with my social studies teacher. I shouted out comments, answers, jokes, whatever in class without raising my hand and I thought I was a big hit because he never told me not to. I was insufferable, I'm sure. One day he starts to tell the class that his wife is coming and the speak to the class and I interrupt with a very clever joke. "You're married? What, is your wife blind or something?" Haha. His face falls and he just straight up leaves the room. He comes back in after a moment and is visibly upset. Apparently he needed to collect himself because he says as I was saying, "My wife is coming in to speak with the class about the struggles of the disabled. She's blind." I've never felt like a bigger butthole. During a particularly chilly Southern California evening, I naturally feared for the comfort of our 7 goldfish, so I did the most logical thing and scooped them out of the fish tank, lined them up on my eldest sister's pillow, and tucked them in. Really, I don't know what my family was thinking. Their water was so chilly, they could have all gotten colds. I can only imagine what your sister's reaction was when there were fish neatly laid out in her bed. I flushed my toy dinosaurs down the toilet hoping they would go to the land before time. They were on a journey to big water. One time I got stuck in a bush in our yard playing by myself. I was unable to get out, flat on my back at the very top of the bush, and resigned myself to fate. I began to contemplate how the rest of my life would playing out with me living in the bush. How would I get dressed for school in the morning? Oh crap, it's a gym day. Where are my gym clothes? The stupidity lies in that I thought I would live in the bush forever, and also in that I was making bush life plans that involved me needing to be out of the bush, or ones that would lead to people finding me and obviously rescuing me from the bush. Jinray telling this story. I think I coined the phrase "this is my life now" because that was my thinking as an 8-year-old. They'll call me Bush Boy. When I was 5 I tied a rope around my waist and climbed 20 feet up a tree. When my mom saw me she freaked out. I told her it's okay mommy. I tied the other end to the tree so I'll be safe. I tied it to the bottom of the tree. Asked my geography teacher if her sex life was great. I was 11-year-old at that time. One of the worst days of my life. This one is long, but totally worth it. I was about 7 at the time. I went to visit my pop in hospital. He had a fall. While I was there I noticed a guy in a wheelchair that was getting so much attention from the nurses. I wanted to be that wanted like he was. So I came up with a genius plan that I would get injured and get the attention I craved. So my mum was reversing out of the driveway. I just lay down with my legs in front of the car. It felt like a crap idea but I just closed my eyes. Next thing I know I heard tires screech. Then my mum let out a psychotic scream, picked me up and beat the absolute frick out of me. I totally deserved it. I think this is the dumbest one I've read so far. Glad your mom had the sense to look behind her when she was backing up, or you could have been crippled for life. I let my guinea pig run around the living room because I thought it was cruel. She was in a little hutch, and she left guinea pellets all over the brown carpet. At least the carpet was brown. As a kid I loved fruit roll-ups. My favorite part was how chewy they were. I didn't realize until I was almost 20 that I hadn't removed the thin plastic film. I had been eating everything including the plastic, and that's why it was so chewy. I am not a smart man, and I'll bet you secretly prefer them with the plastic on now. My time to shine. I stuck a car key into the electrical socket because I wanted to drive my house. Also, it looked like a good fit. I got shocked and cried. I liked a girl in school. Like most boys, I always thought the best way to portray this would be through mocking her and making her feel like crap. One day, I convinced the entire class she was a boy. She was obviously upset and came up to me at the end of the day and begged me to tell everyone it was a lie and that I was only saying it as a joke. Instead, I went back to school the next day and told everyone that after class. She showed me her willy and it was really small. I never did end up with that girl. Oh my god, some guy did the same crap to me. He really liked me and to show that he decided to tell everyone that I have a microdome. I have nothing of the sort. It was really annoying and not the way to get the girls. The catch here was that he was some retarded colleague I worked with. He was 29. At least you grew up. Put red Kool-Aid into the toilet and tell my mommy that I was on my period too. I'm a male.